Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. You're listening to Home in Progress by Repco Light Paints, sponsored by Benjamin Moore. And I've got so much that I'm going to do today. I want to jump right in. And I want to start by talking about the weather, because it's been all over the place this March. And I guess that's what it's supposed to do in March, right? You know, March comes in like a lion, goes out like a lamb. Isn't that the phrase? Yeah, I don't know. I think so. What I do know is that I still hate March. You know, I've always hated March. I've talked about it on the show for a long time. I still hate it. You know, now that I've gotten through it, I do hate it. It gives us good weather, and then all of a sudden it's cold again. And it brings out the child in me every single year. And it's not the happy child, right? Not the one that sees snow and gets all excited. It's the child that's tossing a temper tantrum in the grocery store because that child wants a candy bar and mom said no. You know, I don't want a candy bar. You know, it's an analogy. I could have said that a lot cleaner. It's an analogy. But what I do want is to go outside and not have to scrape a layer of frost off the windshield for any number of reasons. One, because I'm sick of it. I'm sick of scraping frost off. And I'm sick of being cold. And two, this is probably the biggest reason, I'm short and I drive a ridiculous truck. You know, it's a work vehicle, and I'm very appreciative. You know, it's wonderful to have this. But I need to be picked up every morning and lifted into the driver's seat, basically. Or I need a running start, and then I need to jump to get in. So you can only imagine what scraping the windshield is like for me. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. I'm sick of the cold weather. I'm sick of March, all of that. But we're heading into April. And that means that eventually the weather's going to get consistent and warmer, and spring is eventually going to get here. And when that starts to happen, in fact, it's already starting to happen right now, when the weather starts to turn even a little bit, people start asking about exterior painting. They want to know, when is it okay to get outside and start working? Well, years back, you had to wait for temperatures between 50 and 85 degrees. However, in the early 2000s, paint manufacturers, Repco Light among them, started releasing exterior paints that could be used in temperatures down to 40 degrees and less. And the actual labels on those cans usually say down to 35 degrees, which is really kind of nuts. You know, it's just above freezing. Products that do that really change when your painting season can begin. But of course, you know, it's not just straight up that easy. There's a catch or a caveat. Or a few concepts to keep in mind. Temperature is only one piece of the puzzle. There are a couple other factors that matter just as much, maybe more. And if you get these wrong, it doesn't really matter what paint you're using. So let's walk through them. The first thing you need to keep in mind is something most homeowners don't think about, and it's this. The temperature that we see on our phones, that's just the air temperature. But what actually matters when you're painting is something that we talk about all the time on the show here. It's the surface temp. You know, the temperature of the siding, the wood, the trim that you're putting paint on. And those can be very different. You know, the air temperature to the surface temperature, they can be very different. You know, picture the west side of your house on a cool spring morning. The air might be 55 degrees. Feels fine out there. Maybe the sun is starting to warm things up. But that west wall's been in the shade all morning. You know, that surface might easily still be hovering around 40 degrees or lower, depending on the night temps. And it's possible it could be too cold for the paint. So surface temperature, keep that in mind. And if you're curious about how you figure that out, just get a very inexpensive infrared thermometer. $20, you can pick this up, and it will tell you what that surface temperature is. And you can use it on all kinds of other things. You know, people use it for cooking and grilling and all kinds of other things. But it will definitely help you figure it out, the surface temperature, when you're painting. So we've got air temperature and surface temperature covered. Now let's talk about dew point. Dew forms when the surface gets cold enough that the moisture in the surrounding air can no longer stay airborne. It condenses, it settles onto the surface as water droplets, and the temperature where that happens is called the dew point. So the general rule when you're painting outside is that your surface temperature should be at least 5 degrees above the dew point before you start painting. A lot of pros like 10 degrees just to be safe. This isn't really all that complicated. Maybe it sounds complicated, but it's not. Our phone's weather apps usually give us the dew point. Just compare that dew point to the surface temperature. If your surface temperature is 55 and the dew point is 48, you're in good shape. If they're getting close, and that surface temperature isn't more than 5 degrees over the dew point, it's probably worth waiting a bit. And this becomes especially important at the end of the day because as the temperature drops, you can get into trouble pretty quickly. All right, now let's talk about moisture in the surface that you're painting. This is one that can absolutely ruin a paint job. And it's really common this time of year. Wood is porous. It absorbs water. And after a wet winter, after rain in the spring, that moisture can still be inside the wood, even if the surface feels dry in the sun. And even previously painted surfaces, they're not immune. Water can get in through cracks, it can get in through end grain, it can get in around trim and so on. Metal and vinyl, they're different. You don't have moisture inside of them. But wood and masonry, you got to pay attention. And no amount of good prep, no amount of primer, no amount of premium paint is going to save you if the wood or the substrate is too wet. That moisture gets trapped, it tries to escape, and eventually it's going to take the paint with it. Peeling, bubbling, failure. So what do? How do you know when a surface is dry enough to paint? Well, there's another relatively inexpensive tool that can come in really handy, a moisture meter. It's a little handheld gadget. It's going to tell you how much moisture is in the wood or the surface or whatever. You're looking, in this instance, if you're painting outside, you're looking for a number below 15%. Once you start getting above that, you're taking on risk when you continue to paint. If it's pushing 20%, just walk away and let it keep drying. Again, this is not an expensive tool, but it's one that can save you from a lot of headaches. Now, another thing that can save you from headaches when you're painting outside early in the spring or the late fall, honestly, is to use the right product. The right paint product. Not just a low temp paint like we talked about, but something that offers a little bit more. Benjamin Moore's Element Guard, maybe you've heard of it. We've talked about it a bunch, but it's definitely a product to consider. First off, it can be applied at low temps, like we've been discussing. But more importantly, it's rain resistant in as little as 60 minutes. Most exterior paints need several hours before they can handle any moisture. Element Guard is formulated to handle humidity, damp conditions, even wind-driven rain much faster. And what's really interesting to me is you can control a lot of the things that we talked about. You can paint at the right time. You can make sure that the surface isn't damp and all of those things. You can do all the right prep work. But it's not possible to control the weather. We can watch the weather, see what we think is coming, but we can't control it. Element Guard kind of gives you that silver bullet or that safety net against the unexpected. Okay, so Element Guard from Benjamin Moore. Think about that if you're painting outside. Before I wrap all of this up, let's bring everything together into what I hope is a simple schedule for painting outdoors. In the morning, generally speaking, don't rush it. Wait for the dew to burn off, check your surface temperature, and then make sure you're at least 5 degrees above the dew point. Now, traditionally, most painters aren't starting outside until 9 or 10 in the morning this time of year. With a product like Element Guard, you can often move that up a couple hours, which adds up over the course of a project. So if you're a contractor on a schedule, Element Guard, again, another reason to think about it. You can start earlier. During the day, you're going to want to follow the sun around your house. Start on the east side, move south and west. Avoid surfaces that are getting too hot in direct sunlight if you run into that. When it comes time to stop, give yourself a buffer. 2 to 3 hours before sunset is a really good rule of thumb in cooler weather. You want that paint to start setting up before temperatures drop and moisture becomes an issue again. And one last thing, don't forget the overnight forecast when you're looking at this and planning things out. Our favorite rule of thumb is this. If it's going to be 40 degrees or higher for 24 hours after you paint, you're good to go, as long as you're using a low temp paint. If it's lower than that, or it's going to dip lower at night, lower than 40, you might want to wait. Even though the label on the can says 35 degrees, we like to stick to 40 because it's just a really good precaution. All right, one last quick tip that I've got for you if you're working outside this time of year. It's going to make a bigger difference than a lot of people think. Keep your paint inside overnight. Don't leave it in the garage, the cold garage. If the garage is heated, leave it out there. You can live out in the garage like that. But if it's like my garage, don't leave it there. It's going to get cold. And a can that's been sitting at 38 degrees, overnight, doesn't behave the same way as one at room temperature. It's thicker, it's harder to spread, it doesn't cover as well. Just bringing it inside the night before helps everything go on smoother. All right, if you're thinking about tackling a project this spring, stop out at any Repcolite and we'll walk you through exactly what you need to know for whatever you're working on. Okay, let's shift gears and talk about lighting, the importance of it, and some surprising effects that it has on us in our homes. That's all coming up right after this. Home in Progress is brought to you by Repco Light Paints and Benjamin Moore. You know, people often think of paint as just another line item on the project supply list. But here's the thing. Everything you do, every hour of prep, every stroke of the brush, all comes down to the quality of the paint. The paint is the project. Make sure it's the best. And we're back. You're listening to Home in Progress by Repco Light Paints and sponsored by Benjamin Moore. Last week, I went on and on and on ad nauseum about how our brains never stop reading the rooms that we're in. You know, the brain is always scanning for signals, looking for cues about safety and comfort and belonging. I talked about that last week. The bottom line that I was trying to make was that our brains naturally do this. You know, we don't turn it on, we can't turn it off. And when our brain finds spaces that feel right, our brain settles down, it becomes comfortable. When it finds spaces that feel off, even slightly off, our brain keeps cranking out feelings of unease. And as I mentioned last week, those feelings of unease or the feelings of calm, you know, whatever we're getting from this, they're not big feelings. They're not these big, huge, bust through the wall feelings. Not like the Kool-Aid Man. Right? They're not Kool-Aid Man feelings. They don't dominate our every single waking moment. Sometimes we don't even consciously realize that they're there, but they are. And they do affect how we feel in a given room or space, lurking underneath the surface, just beneath the surface. We talked about that idea last week. And what I was getting at with all of that is because we can't control that, we can't turn it on and off, and because it directly impacts how much actual peace we feel in our homes and in the spaces that we design, because of those things, it's really important to figure out what our brains are looking for. What's going to make them happy. Last week, we hit two of these things, cohesion and variation. Basically, our brains find peace and ease in spaces where things feel like they belong together. That's the cohesion. But our brain also wants there to be an organized, intentional variation. It's got to have both of those things. If it's just cookie cutter, it's boring to our brain. And, we still get those feelings of unease. All right, that was last week. If you care to hear more about that, you can go and find episode 451 and listen to your heart's content. Today, I want to talk about something else that plays into all of that. Something that's doing more work in your home, probably than any piece of furniture. Possibly, this feels blasphemous, but possibly more than any paint color, more than any piece of art on the wall. I want to talk about light. And I mean this in a neuroscience sense. Light isn't just how you see your space. It's actively shaping your brain chemistry every hour of every day. And most of us are getting it wrong in ways that are costing us. And it's costing us in sleep, moods that aren't what we wish they were, poor focus, lack of energy, all of that. We're paying those costs because of lighting, and we're never connecting the dots back to the bulbs in our light fixtures. So we're going to talk about a lot of practical stuff, things that we can do today to make a difference. But I want to start with the research because it's genuinely striking. Light affects your body in important ways, even when it has nothing to do with what you're seeing. We've got specialized cells in our eyes that are constantly reading light and sending signals to our brain. And those signals control things like our sleep cycle, our moods, our alertness. Basically, they control how well we think. So what we're left with is irregular light environments. And what I mean by that is, the wrong kind of light at the wrong time of day. Irregular light, wrong kind of light, wrong time of day. It's not bad light, it's not ugly light, it's just irregular light. And irregular light leads to problems with our sleep, with our mood, and even with learning. But the good news is the reverse is also true. The right light and lighting can have positive impacts on how our brain functions throughout the day. And we see this play out in all kinds of real-world settings. And the information's really pretty interesting. Let's just look at a couple, because they make the case so well. Hospitals. Patients in brighter hospital rooms recover faster. In some cases, up to 40% faster. They even report needing less pain medication. So brighter, better lit hospital rooms, patients are recovering faster. Other data shows that office workers with access to windows, they sleep about 45 minutes more per night, not per day. The other ones, when they don't have windows, they sleep 45 minutes more per day during the workday. So if that sounds appealing to you, get an office without any windows. If you'd actually like to be more productive at work, you want to find something with, access to windows. You can get some natural lighting. Statistics show that all kinds of other things increase. Our creativity goes up when we're exposed to natural light. Our productivity increases. We feel less tired. We don't feel gloomy. All of those things improve with natural lighting. And I can attest to this in my own little way. I work in a 10 by 10, roughly, probably a 10 by 15. I'm looking at it now. Probably a 10 by 15 studio. And I spend most of my day in here by myself. And let me tell you, it's floor to ceiling gray. There's gray carpet on the walls, gray foamy things on the ceiling, so my voice doesn't echo when I blather on and on. Everything's gray. Even the chairs are gray. What's not gray is black. And that's the space that I live in, work in, all day long. No windows, no natural light at all. And every now and then, it really gets to me. And I find myself really struggling to write something, to write a segment for the show or just to do something creative, that I've got to do for my normal job. And in order to help with that, I've started going out. There's another room right outside the door here that I can go and hang out in and work in a little bit from time to time. And it's got all kinds of natural lighting. And when I'm out there, I feel this incredible boost. I'm happier. I'm singing songs and just living the dream out there, but I'm more creative, I'm more productive, and all of that. So really, the worst radio segments you've ever heard that I've done, they've been written in my little gray room. The best ones probably were written outside or in the other room where I've got more natural lighting. I used to think that whole thing, needing the natural lighting was a little bit touchy-feely, a little bit wonky. I didn't buy into that. But I've lived it. I completely get it. It's definitely real. Now, we've been talking all along so far about natural light. But the bigger idea here is getting back to that idea that I floated just a few minutes ago about irregular light, the wrong kind of light at the wrong time of day. Natural light matters, absolutely. But this isn't just about natural light. It's about getting the right kind of light at the right times of the day, throughout the day in your home. So keep that in mind for a minute and then pause and think about your home. Think about your home office, your laundry room, your basement, your kitchen on maybe like a dark winter morning or, like what we're experiencing now, a dark March morning. How much of your fatigue, your low-level gloomy feeling on certain days, your afternoon fog, how much of it is maybe just the light, the wrong light or maybe the lack of light that's causing all of those things? A lot of us, when we think about light as a decoration question. Do I like this fixture? Do I like this lamp? Is that going to look good in the space? We think about it that way, as kind of a design thing. But light is actually a biological question first, and it just happens to have design consequences. All right. With all of that said, let's look at some practical ways to approach light and lighting in your home to give your brain exactly what it's looking for. With the goal that our brains will settle in and find peace and calm in our homes. Or, depending on the space that we're working in and what we're trying to accomplish there, maybe we want more alertness, more productivity, more creativity. Whatever you're after, lighting really sets the tone. And we're going to talk about some practical things you can do to get where you want to go. But we're going to do that right after this. Home in Progress is brought to you by Repco Light Paints and Benjamin Moore. Think about it. You spend hours prepping, sanding, taping, and then finally painting. Don't throw all that work away with an inferior product. The paint isn't just another supply. The paint is the project. Make sure it's the best. And we're back. You're listening to Home in Progress by Repco Light Paints, sponsored by Benjamin Moore. And we're talking about lighting, the impact that light has on our moods, on our sleep, on our productivity, even on how creatively and clearly we think. Last segment, we talked about some of the science and the research that backs this up. Now I want to look at 3 practical areas to consider in regards to your own home. These are things that you can do today. You can do them tomorrow, and they will bring about real change, instant change in how you feel about your home. Now, the first is to come back to natural light. Specifically, I'm talking about morning light, because it turns out morning light matters more than any other kind of light. In some of those same hospital studies that we talked about in the last segment, patients who had rooms with windows facing the southeast left the hospital in a good way, in the way that you want to leave the hospital. Patients in east and southeast facing rooms left the hospital 16 to 40% faster than patients in northwest facing rooms. So think about that. There's some practical stuff right off the bat for you. If you find yourself in the hospital this weekend, God forbid, this weekend, next weekend, whatever, in the near future, do whatever you can to get a southeast facing room. Take those northwest exposure rooms at your own risk. You go in there, who knows when you come out. Southeast facing room, 16 to 40% faster. If you want to minimize the hospital stay, that's what you're looking for. That's what you're advocating for. Seriously, though, the point of that research, among other things, the point that matters to me right now and the findings of all those other studies that we talked about is that morning light is the most valuable light of the day. It's what sets your internal clock, the circadian rhythm, to say it in the fancy way, sets your internal clock. It tells your body, wake up, be alert, get moving, do stuff, make coffee, eat breakfast. It tells you all of those things. Morning light brings a whole bunch of stuff into our lives and gets us started. If you're not getting that light because of your home layout or blackout curtains or just habit, you just lurk in the shadows. If you're just lurking in the shadows in the morning, you're starting your day at a disadvantage. So here's the really simple, practical thing. Rip out some walls and create some. No, that's not practical at all. All you need to do is within an hour of waking up, get yourself near a window. Fix yourself up first, right? If you've got nearby neighbors, let's do a favor and a service for everybody out there. You don't want to offend your neighbors. I know how I wake up in the morning, and the neighbors don't need to see me glued to a window right off the bat. So take that hour, within an hour of waking up, fix yourself up, make yourself presentable if necessary, and then get yourself near a window. Eat your breakfast there, sit there with your coffee, with your book. Some people wake up and do prayers and Bible stuff. Whatever you do, do it by that open window. Get that light. Open the blinds right away. This isn't about creating ambiance in a room. It's about setting your brain for the day, getting a good start for the day. That's the first practical thing. Second thing to think about is this. Choose bulb temperature intentionally. Light has something, I'm sure we all know this, light has something called temperature. And I'm sorry, if you're one of the people that don't know this, don't feel left out. There's probably a whole bunch of, people like you. You probably live in the shadows. You're not getting enough morning light. You didn't know about color temperature of bulbs. No, I'm joking. Don't feel bad. Light has something called color temperature. Lower numbers, like 2700 K. They're warm, soft, yellow light. They remind us of old incandescent bulbs. They remind us of the glow of candles to some extent. And they make a room feel really cozy. 2700 K bulbs. That's what they do. Higher numbers, like 4,000 K, let's say, or 5,000 K, whatever. They're cooler, brighter. They're more blue-white. They make a room feel alert and focused. Blue light tells your brain, hey, wake up and suppress melatonin, the sleep hormone. So that's what blue light does. If you've got bright, cool bulbs in your bedroom or your living room at night, think what that's doing. That's basically telling your brain it's go time. It's time to get up and get moving and do stuff. So those bulbs are working against you. So think about, the bulb temperature and choose the bulb temperature intentionally. Remember earlier we talked about irregular light, finding the wrong light at the wrong time of day. That's exactly what this is right here. If you've got those blue-white, those really cool bulbs in a space where you're trying to wind down at the end of a day, those bulbs, that's irregular light. That is giving you exactly what you don't need. It's the opposite of what you want in those spaces. So check the bulbs in your home. Right after the show, go through the house and check to see what you've got. If you've got the cooler temperature bulbs in your wind down spaces, swap them for warmer bulbs. That's the 5000K, the 4000K. Those bulbs should be swapped out for 2700K, the warmer, softer, yellower light bulbs, because that's going to help you wind down better. Now, I know that many of us buy bulbs intentionally. We already are doing this. But a lot of us just grab a box and we put them in, and we don't consciously think about what the color temperature is and what it could be doing to us kind of beneath the surface. My kids got a new house, and the previous owner filled all the light fixtures throughout the whole home with these cooler, bluer bulbs. And man, do you feel it. It definitely creates an unwanted vibe in the living room and in the bedrooms for sure. It just feels off. And it's all coming from those bulbs. So get the warmer bulbs in the spaces that you want to rest and wind down. On the other hand, those bluer, cooler bulbs still serve a purpose. They're perfect for spaces where you need to think and work and function. So when you're checking your bulbs later today, check the bulbs in your home office as well. If you've got warmer bulbs in there creating a cozy vibe and you're trying to work, you're fighting your own brain chemistry. In spaces like that, during the day, you actually want brighter, cooler light, somewhere in that 3,500 to 4,000K range. That kind of light is going to help your brain stay alert and focused. So again, choose the bulbs with intention based on the purpose or the most common purpose of a given space. If it's for working and being active and alert and productive and energized, opt for something in the cooler range. If the room is mostly for winding down and relaxing and finding some calm at the end of the day, opt for the warmer bulbs. If you've got a space in your home that's been feeling off and you haven't been able to put your finger on exactly what's going on there, it's very possible it could be the temperature of the light in that room. And that's really great news, because that fix is as easy as, spending $5 on the right temperatured bulb. So, second practical thing, choose those temperatures intentionally for the space that you're putting them in. The third practical thing that I want to stress is the importance of layering light. Lots of rooms in our homes are lit by one source, a ceiling fixture. We have a specific name for those lights, which I was surprised to find out was the legit, or I don't know how legit it is. You're not going to find it on a box, in a store, not this phrase. But we all maybe know what I'm talking about. There's a specific light fixture that is on our ceilings. I really didn't need to go down this road. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, that's fine. Your mind is pure and pristine, and you're good to go. Let's just move on. We've got this ceiling fixture light. It's centered in the room. It's pointing straight down, and it creates this really flat light that's got kind of an institutional feel. Our brain perceives it as an office or a grocery store or something like that. That's the vibe that it creates. Not the atmosphere most of us are trying to create in our living rooms and our bedrooms or pretty much anywhere in the home. Boy, this kitchen sure feels like an office. I do like that. It's not working for you. So instead, think in layers. Keep your overhead light, sure, but add a couple of lamps. Floor lamps, table lamps. Put them in the corners of the room. And then at night, turn the overhead light off. Use the other lamps. Give it 15 minutes. You're only going to need 15 minutes with this, and you're going to feel the difference. The room's going to feel calmer, more relaxed, more inviting, and your body follows that signal. If you haven't done this in your bedroom or your living room, your family room, whatever, try it. If you're still operating with that, those lights, on the center of the ceiling, one single overhead light, get other lighting in there. Layer your lighting. It's probably the highest impact, lowest cost thing you can do to improve your sleep and your evening experience at home. And who doesn't want those things improved, right? So do that. That's practical thing number 3. I should have come up with a better word than thing. Practical suggestion, I don't know. I'm going to go with thing because I'm working in a gray room with no access to natural light. So my brain's just doing what it can. It's just getting by. So that was the third practical thing. And that was all the practical things that I had. The bottom line, the big takeaway here is to realize that before you go and paint a room, before you buy a new piece of furniture, before you do anything else to a space in your home, think about the light. Not as a decoration, not as a design first, feature, but think about it as something biological, something that has a biological impact. The light isn't biological. The impact that it has on you is biological. So think about it that way and make the right decisions. The most beautiful paint color in the whole wide world is going to look wrong under the wrong light. The coziest furniture arrangement in the whole wide world is not going to feel cozy under a 5000K overhead bulb. Light really does set the tone. And the good news is, and it's permeated this whole segment, the good news is that fixing your light is really one of the most affordable, immediate, and easy changes you can make. A dimmable LED bulb in the right color temperature costs $5, $10. I don't know. With things going on now, it could be $50, but it's still $50 well spent. A floor lamp from a thrift store costs $10. I've got an extra one at my house that my daughter picked up on the side of the road and then never took to her new house when she left. You can have it. Swapping out a ceiling fixture costs less than a dinner out. You don't need a big renovation all the time to make a big impact. You just need to understand what your light is doing to your brain and then make a few deliberate choices about it. Your brain is reading your rooms, in your home every moment of every single day. Make sure the lighting is working for you, not against you. Because we all want to get to that feeling of peace when we get to home. Lighting is a big part of it. All right, let's shift gears. On social media, last week I think it was, I ran into an ad that was really crazy effective about carbon monoxide detectors. It literally terrified me, and I dug into it, and I want to talk about it and some very real concerns about carbon monoxide detectors. We're going to get to all of that, but we're going to ground it in reality. We're not going to go the scare tactics route that the ad did a little bit. So if you've seen the ad, you'll know it when I talk about it. We're going to get to all of that right after this. You're listening to Home in Progress, where the projects are real, the mistakes, they're educational, sometimes painful, mostly educational, and the only thing more stubborn than that old wallpaper on your bathroom wall is your determination to get it fixed. Proudly sponsored by Repcolite Paints and Benjamin Moore. Paint with a purpose, people who care, and everything you need to get the job done right. And we're back. You're listening to Home in Progress by Repcolite Paints, and happily and proudly sponsored by Benjamin Moore. Anyway, I don't know about that. Just making claims that sound good. Anyway, maybe you've seen a viral ad that I ran into on Facebook. It's one about a firefighter, a supposed firefighter. He looked like a firefighter. And then again, maybe he was just AI. Maybe he's an actor. Who knows anymore? But anyway, he looked like a firefighter, and he said he was one. So take that for what it's worth. The story he told was the point. It was a lengthy ad, but it was really well done, and it hooked me. I read the whole thing. He was talking about a family that barely made it out of their home alive because of carbon monoxide from a cracked heat exchanger in their furnace. Now, according to the story in the big write-up, the carbon monoxide levels in their home were at about 50 to 60 parts per million, and the family was already feeling loopy and a little sick. Now, they made it out, but the core of the story was this. Their carbon monoxide detectors never sounded, never went off. The ad goes on to say that most home detectors won't go off until things hit 70 parts per million, and by then it could be too late. Now, the solution that they're offering is a carbon monoxide detector that alarms sooner and actually shows you the exact carbon monoxide reading on a digital screen. All right. The ad was really effective for me. I read the whole thing, and then I checked their products out, and now I'm getting emails from them on a regular basis, and probably will for the rest of my life. But anyway, I dug into it. I started doing a lot of research to find out if what this guy was saying was right. What was he making true claims? And I learned some things. The ad's definitely tapping into something real, but I want to cut through the scare tactics and get to the facts so you can protect your family without losing sleep. So here's what I came up with and what I discovered in my deep dive. First off, most of us think a carbon monoxide detector is going to work like a smoke detector. It senses smoke, the little alarm goes off. Pretty straightforward. Carbon monoxide detectors, they're different, and the difference is huge. Standard home carbon monoxide alarms have to follow a national safety standard called UL 2034. Now, it's designed to catch the dangerous, fast-rising spikes that can kill you quickly, but it deliberately waits on lower levels to avoid false alarms from normal stuff, like cooking or a car idling in the driveway. Here's exactly how they work, and this is what the standard is. At 70 parts per million, carbon monoxide, when it senses that, the alarm, the standard allows for the alarm to have up to 4 hours to sound. At 150 parts per million, when it senses that, it's allowed 10 to 50 minutes before it's got a sound. At 400 parts per million, it must go off in 4 to 15 minutes. So 4 to 15 minutes at 400 parts per million. Anything below 30 parts per million, it generally stays completely quiet, no alarm. And most models won't even show you a reading. Now, that built-in delay is why the firefighter's story really does, check out. At 50 or 60 parts per million, you or your kids would start getting headaches, dizziness, nausea, maybe that flu-like foggy feeling after a couple hours of exposure, especially overnight when you're sleeping. And your carbon monoxide detector would probably be silent through all of that. And yeah, there are tragic cases where prolonged lower-level exposure went undetected until it was too late. So that part of the ad, completely legit. It's not lying about that. But here's the part that the ad doesn't really say very clearly. Those standard UL-listed detectors, they save thousands of lives every year. They're required by most building codes for a reason. They're engineered to wake you up way before carbon monoxide reaches immediately life-threatening levels. The scare part is making it sound like your current detector is kind of worthless, when for sudden high-level leaks, it's actually doing exactly what it's supposed to do. So the ad's got some truth to it, and it's also blurring some facts to scare us a little bit and get us to buy, their products. So what do we do with all of that? Well, here's a really safe and practical set of steps that take into account everything we talked about. First off, make sure that you've got carbon monoxide detectors in your home. Install UL-listed carbon monoxide alarms on every level of your home and outside every sleeping area. These are the standard ones that we talked about, the ones the ad didn't really like. But remember, they do the job. So make sure you've got them installed in your home. Combo smoke and carbon monoxide units are fine. Smoke detector, carbon monoxide detector units, there's combos out there. They're fine. Those would work as well. But get them installed. The next thing you need to do is make sure you're testing them monthly. There's usually a test button. Do that, and also replace batteries once a year. Third thing, replace the whole detector every 5 to 7 years or sooner if it hits end-of-life mode. Now, this is something that I hadn't known before, but carbon monoxide detectors don't last forever. You need to replace the entire unit, not just the batteries, but the entire unit every 5 to 7 years because the sensor inside is an electrochemical cell, and over time, it loses its sensitivity. So if your detector is more than 7 years old, replace it today. It's cheap insurance. Don't even debate it. Just replace it today. Fourth thing, get your fuel-burning appliances, your furnace, your water heater, your fireplace, your stove, all of them professionally inspected and cleaned every single year. Most carbon monoxide tragedies start with something really simple that could have been fixed. And then the last thing that I've got is, basically going back to that firefighter's advice, and this is where I think it's really good, consider adding one of those low-level carbon monoxide monitors that gives you a digital readout and alarms way earlier, say at 25 or 30 parts per million within a minute. These aren't replacements for your UL-listed alarms, but they're really smart supplements. They let you catch a slow leak from a cracked heat exchanger or a blocked chimney way before anybody feels sick. At the end of the day, that viral ad really did get my attention for a good reason. Lower level carbon monoxide is sneaky, and it does happen. But you don't have to live in fear of it either. A couple of smart upgrades and a yearly furnace check can really go a long way towards making sure that your home is protected and everybody's safe. If you're not sure how old your detectors are, if you're thinking they're on that 7-year gap, 5 to 7 years, like we said, get them changed. If you do need help picking out a new low-level model, drop by your local hardware store, ask them about it, or call the fire department. A lot of the times they're happy to point you in the right direction, so give them a call. And there you go. Another brilliant episode in the books. Just think how good it would have been had I been working and recording in, the glory of natural light, instead of this dark, dreary, gray room with no real good lighting at all. Instead of my brain, kind of drooping and dragging, it would have been popping. But anyway, if you want to catch this episode again, you can find it online at repcolite.com or really anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can find it on Spotify, YouTube, Audible, Apple Podcasts, anywhere. Check it out. And then when you're there, subscribe to the podcast and also leave us a review. That really helps, and it helps other people find the show. All right, whatever you do today, make sure paint's a part of it. Have a great weekend, everybody, and I'll see you next week. For Home in Progress by Repcolite Paints, I'm Dan Hansen. Thanks for listening.